Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. This is Shannon Glover from Unique Venues, and we're so glad that you can be with us for today's webinar, which is Advice on Overcoming 6 Common Event Planning Challenges. We actually have 2 great presenters for you. The first is Barry Brown, Director of National Sales at Regal Entertainment Group. And we'd also like to welcome Benny Algueta, Associate Manager of Internal Events at Blizzard Entertainment. I do want to let you know that we will be answering your questions during the webinar. And there's a couple different ways that you can connect with us. You can either use the chat function that's available through the GoToWebinar that you see there, or they've created a hashtag for this event. It's hashtag 99eventproblems. And if you're on Twitter, we would ask you can also post your questions there, and they'll be making sure that they have everything covered. And if you just want to share an interesting tip or something that's really cool that you picked up from the webinar, we encourage you to use the hashtag for that as well. So without further ado, I am so happy to introduce to you Barry and Benny.
Shannon, thanks so much for your time, and thanks to Unique Venues for letting us be a part of it. This is Barry at Regal Entertainment Group, and I'll be kind of moderating the webinar today and asking Benny lots of questions as we go through this. But our hope is that through this webinar that we'll get a chance to talk about some of the 6 most common challenges that event planners face today, and then we'll go through some questions and answers at the end, kind of like Shannon mentioned previously, as far as where you can type those questions in there as we go along. And if some of them pop up as we go through some of these challenges, then we may jump to a couple questions as we go through. But what I'd like to do is take a couple minutes and just introduce to you Benny with Blizzard Entertainment. And Benny is a friend and colleague of ours here at Regal Entertainment Group. Blizzard Entertainment books several events with us here each and every year, and they've been working with us for several years now. And give you a little bit of background about Blizzard. They are a global company. They've got offices in Irvine, California, as well as Austin, Texas, and they also have offices in Europe as well as Asia Pacific. And they manufacture and make several computer and video games, and probably the one that you know them most by is World of Warcraft, which is probably their main video game and one that is popular amongst everyone out there today. So that's a little bit about Blizzard. We'll give you a little bit more information about Regal and what we do here, but I'd like to ask Benny if he can just give us a little overview of him and his background as an event planner and how you've gotten to where you've gotten, Benny.
Yeah, thank you, Barry, and thank you, Shannon, Unique Venues, as well as Regal for this opportunity. I actually started out as a game tester here at Blizzard, who at one point helped volunteer the newly hired events manager when the department first formed back in 2006. And I became so interested in this whole event planning industry that I continued to assist her for several months while juggling my normal testing duties. And then separately, during that time, my sister and I also decided to form our own independent events company. And at first, we just did small parties for friends and family, but it quickly grew to doing corporate events and business meetings on a much larger scale. So in addition to that, I also, to further my education in this field, I enrolled in a certificate program at Cal State Long Beach for professional meeting and event planning, which had event planners with tens and their decades of experience, all giving their tips as well, much like this. And with my independent planning experience combined with kind of that formal training, I officially became hired on the Blizzard events team as a coordinator back in 2010. So since then, I've been involved with all of our events of all shapes and sizes, from smaller team meetings to large conventions for thousands like BlizzCon, and am now the associate manager for our internal events team.
Fantastic. And Benny, just so some of the audience gets an idea, you can mention this just a little bit, but what types of events and kinds of events are you typically in charge of planning, and maybe even include some of the events that you've planned with Regal here as well?
Yeah, so as part of the internal team, my primary involvement, although we do help out with the external facing, but the primary involvement for internal is events for our 2,500 Irvine employees, as well as their friends and families in many cases. These can be smaller events, such as our service award event for our 10 and 15-year employees, which are cocktail-style events for about 150 to 200 people. But it can also get a lot more complex, like our Summerfest, which is our family picnic company event, which is open to all employees plus up to three guests. So they can get rather massive. We also do a lot of recurring events, such as our show and tell event done 2 to 3 times a year, which actually takes place at Edwards Irvine Spectrum Theater. And that is where each development team shows what they're currently working on, and having it at that theater lends itself really well because you get this amazing game content on this larger-than-life screen with an amazing sound system. So in addition to that, we also do employee movie screenings with Regal as well, such as the employee premiere we did for our very own Warcraft movie that came out earlier this year, as well as other highly anticipated movies.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. And you have a unique role where you get to plan and manage and handle multiple events across multiple different venues and platforms and everything else. So, as I'll jump right into kind of these what our session looks like here. But one of the things that we decided to do is we wanted to survey the Unique Venues audience to make sure that we were really in touch with some of the challenges that planners face today, and specifically those that are looking at unique and different types of venues outside of your traditional meeting locations. And so, with that said, those top 6 challenges that were on the screen just a minute ago were ranked 1 through 6 in the most challenging to the least challenging as far as the top 6 go. And with that, we also wanted to just share that we know not every one of you on this webinar is strictly an event planner. You may wear an event planner hat because of the position that you're in your company or in your organization, and it's a secondary thing as opposed to a primary event planner function. But we also know several of you as well. 67% of the audience plan corporate events and company meetings most of the time in their role. And then again, we kind of found some additional information. 31% of the audience plans 15 events or more, and the most important factors rolled up in all of this as one was price and location. So let's this is kind of just how that polling ranks out. But Benny, as far as your challenges and how they relate, how would you rank your challenges as opposed to how the survey results came out on this question here? Were they similar or were they different?
Yeah, the funny thing, so a couple of things definitely are up there. For me, kind of the first, in my mind, kind of the top one of those 6 you have there is finding the right venue, which is 3 on there, but it also goes very much hand in hand with staying in budget. I think they lend themselves together. They kind of go, together when as far as both what's difficult and challenges and things like that. But for me, actually, especially employee facing, my third challenge, if I was to choose a top 3, would actually be pleasing the client, just because it is so important that we make sure our employees and their families are happy. So a little bit different, but for the most part, the bigger issues are called out there.
Sounds good. And I think, at the end of the day, if the employees and their families aren't happy or the client isn't happy, then we lose the opportunity to help them down the road, or they question what it is we're going to do next. So anyhow, let's jump right into challenge number one, which is staying within the budget. And I think as event planners, budget tends to be one of those subjects that we don't love to talk about. It's there. We know we have a budget to work with, but at the end of the day, we love being creative. And budgets and costs can be boring, but we know that they're essential to an event. And so, Benny, how do you get to a budget and stick to a budget when in event planning things move so quickly?
Yeah, and they for sure do, kind of planning an event. But the very first thing we do on our end is establish the goals of the event. What are we trying to accomplish with it? What are the key elements? And then from there we can kind of then work on what the majority of the budget will be focused on, whether it's a venue that's going to amaze guests as they enter, or one that will display a presentation or video really well and kind of be the focus, or one that's just an empty slate that we can really just make our own with staging and lighting and scenic, things like that. So having clear understanding of what aspect the event is focusing on helps us to better allocate the budget so that we're spending the money on the right things. Additionally, using tools to help track costs both before as estimates and as they come in is key. I'm a big Excel person myself, as most of us here are, and using spreadsheets very similar actually to the one you guys have up right now. And I even like to break it down a bit further and try to even copy a quote line by line, so that way I can compare it once the actual invoice comes in. So that being said, there are so many programs out there nowadays that will help guide you with budgets, whether it be something specific like you have cvent.com's budget tool, or a more general one like QuickBooks. You could even do something like Google Docs and then have that ability to have multiple people kind of view and edit it in real time. So the most important thing is that you have a system to help make sure you're keeping track of your spending, you're estimating it, and you really have that clear guideline as far as what the focus will be.
Got it. And I know you had talked a lot about Excel being your friends, and tracking is so vital. And I think that's one of those things that, again, as long as we plan events and try to work within a budget, it's really understanding how do we make sure that we're hitting on those budget expectations as we go through the process. All right, so with that, let's jump to challenge number two, which is venue availability. And I know that that's one of those that can typically take, can sometimes get legs of its own depending upon where you're looking at going. And, I think now that when we've established a budget and the framework around the event, we've identified our goals, experience that the audience should have, the expectations of the event, then we really got to focus on the venue and availability. So with that, Benny, with as much event planning experience as you have, I'm sure you've run into availability issues with venues. What can planners do to avoid or get ahead of the issues and minimize any sort of issues with venue availability?
Yeah, definitely. I've run into that before. I mean, in an ideal world, establishing and booking the venue should be the very first and earliest thing a planner does. Obviously, there's going to be situations out of your control, but the best thing you can do, at least that I've found, is reach out to the venue contact early on in the planning process, and be in just constant communication, giving them updates as far as the status of things. Confirm with them that they are available to hold dates for you, define the deadline on when they need a confirmation or even a deposit, establish those needs and deadlines so you know what dates you're tracking towards, and then can use them when it comes to making decisions. You'd be surprised at how much faster you can get a decision on things when you approach the decision maker with, we need to know by X date, instead of just saying a general ASAP. Also, it's really important to have backup plans and determine what areas you can be more flexible in. Does it have to be that certain date or that certain time? How important is it that a specific venue or it has to be that venue, or can you be at one kind of similar with similar aspects that you're trying to accomplish with the same goals? Or maybe it's even something you can negotiate with the venue itself. Are there aspects you can add or change so that it better aligns with the venue to make it more of an appealing event to them? It's to your benefit to ask all the questions from both the client and the venue to see where your wiggle room is.
Gotcha. And as you look at availability of a venue, are there different types of venues that you look at and go, okay, there's more risk associated to these that we may get bumped, and or the notion that you have to maybe have a backup plan or a contingency plan in place, or do you guys do that with all events?
Well, it's different for each scenario. A lot of times, you here with a lot of recurring events, we are able to, be able to use consistent, locations. Finding the venue can definitely be tough, but in the end, it all does come down to kind of what I discussed about tackling budgets, kind of establishing the goals and the focus of events. There are a lot of amazing venues out there. All those options can seem just so overwhelming, but when you start kind of comparing them and what they have to offer to the overall objectives, you can start eliminating options and focus on ones that can really work best for your event. So it's kind of important to kind of make sure you have that kind of list in mind, and then there you can kind of work up backup plans and venues that can also fit.
Makes sense. And obviously what goes along with availability is finding the right venue, and that in and of itself can be challenging. There's so many different your traditional meeting and events places, convention centers, hotel ballrooms, things like that. But in today's day and age, I think people want things that are different and unique. And so the idea of finding the right venue, but not only finding the right venue, but finding the right venue that will work alongside you is key. And so, as we look at that, no two venues are the same. Benny, can you give us some advice on venue selection, things to keep in mind, and then how you and your team at Blizzard determine what type of venue you're going to select?
Yeah, so kind of to echo what I said earlier, it's really about establishing that focus. It's overall, is it about the decor of the space or an amazing AV system, or does it even have like a unique activity or meal it can provide or things like that? Really, it can help you kind of trickle down that list the more you have a clear understanding of what the important things of that venue is. Actually, a good example personally is that show and tell event I had mentioned earlier. When it had originally started out, we did it in a movie theater, knowing that the video and audio were the primary focus of the event. And then eventually we had grown larger than any single theater had to offer, and we had to figure out what to do next. So it came down to ultimately two options. Do we split people into multiple theaters, or do we try to find a venue that can hold everyone, even if it's not a movie theater? So we ended up deciding going with the latter and found a large hotel meeting room that could hold all of us. We projected the presentations on the screens, and we brought in an AV company to set up speakers around the space. We were able to sit everyone together, and really it was a successful event overall from a production standpoint. It just lacked that quality and that impressive scale that the gameplay footage was getting from a movie theater. So we then decided that the next one would take place at the theater again, and we would just simulcast throughout multiple theaters, and that allowed us to be able to accommodate company growth for years to go, or for years to come, but it still had that theater experience. And we found that employees actually didn't mind sitting or not sitting all in one space, and we were more than willing to arrive early so that we could hold these before the theater opened, which was needed to have it in multiple theaters. So it worked out really well for us, and we've been doing it ever since, just because we had a clear understanding that the that audio and video was so important to the event. So again, it kind of goes back to what is key for you to make this event successful.
Well, I think you mentioned this just in your talk was, how important is the decor to the event and the we'll call it the ambiance versus how important is the audio video or any other aspect of the event, and making sure that you choose a venue that really lends itself to what's the most important as far as one of the goals for an event. So we know, again, finding the right venue can be extremely difficult, and you mentioned some of those tools that you use to find venues and making sure that you're finding ones that are reputable and that work well for you guys, and how sometimes making a change, you can make a change and then end up going, hey, we need to be right back where we used to be because this is that much more important than everybody being together. So that's a really good important factor as you look at trying to find the right venue. And so we'll jump into challenge number 4, which is technology. And technology is ever changing, and I think from an event planner perspective, technology is playing an even greater role today than it has in the past. And part of the reason for that is that the costs for production to produce some sort of good piece of content has gone down tremendously. So the days of hiring a production company to go out and script and film something that was what we would consider to be Hollywood quality or great quality has really gone down dramatically. And so companies and organizations are putting together amazing pieces of content for a fraction of the cost that they used to, and they can do more and more. And so the big thing is, in an industry where the experience is everything and content is king, Benny, talk to us about how hard it is these days for planners to find venues with the right technology accommodations. And also, what are some of the questions we as event planners should be asking about technology, since it is so critical these days?
Yeah, that's a great question, just because, like you said, technology as part of the event has just grown so much in even just a few amount of years. Even like projection mapping and things like that, have become so dominant now, and it's just incredible. In my experience, technology at an event comes down to kind of a balance between what the venue already has and what the vendor has to provide for it. After having that understanding of what you want in that space, it's best to discuss with your venue kind of the limitations and what they already have on hand. Are you able to display videos already so that you're not needing a vendor, or do they already have this great speaker setup throughout the space for your sound? What kind of lighting do they already have on hand, so you won't need to have that brought in? Knowing that availability and those limitations of your venue is key, and can really help you save money not having to bring in venues, but it also can really help you avoid headaches and days leading up to the event when things become surprises. So when approaching a venue, really just or even venue selections, actually, this kind of goes back to the original question, is if technology is a big focus on it and is a big part, and because of that it's a big part of your budget, really figuring out what, from a venue standpoint, it can do for you to kind of provide at least a good portion of that, so you're not going out to dumping it all in external vendors.
And with that, I know you kind of talked about simulcasting from auditorium to auditorium. And this is kind of a question off the cuff that we kind of didn't talk about, but what are the different types of, we'll say, technology, I won't say snafus or questions or things we as event planners might want to ask, or the types of technology that you've had to deal with that may have been scary, but after all was said and done, things worked out fine, or you learned a lot around that you might be able to share?
Yeah, no, that's a great one too. So definitely, especially working with, I'll start kind of on the theater end, because that can, involve, when you're involving simulcast, and actually on top of that, we then record both the audio and the visual of it, and then do kind of private screenings here for everyone who missed it. So there are a lot of moving parts when it comes to AV technology, recording, things like that. One thing that kind of is a key component is making sure that first off, that you have enough time to test through some of these. I mean, we, when we do an event at 9, we usually end up coming at like 6, if not earlier, so that way we can get a clear run through of things and really be able to test things thoroughly. But even leading up to the event, the more ability you have to test, to kind of work with that technology, the better. We as event planners, we're supposed to have good knowledge in everything, but we aren't necessarily experts. And even involving people that you do, vendors and even coworkers that are really familiar with it leading up to the event, the more you have that ability to kind of troubleshoot, the better. So I don't know about specific questions to ask. It's so hard because each one's so different, but I would say, or I would recommend, just really making sure you're troubleshooting everything as often and as early as possible, so you can see where the snafus are.
Totally makes sense. Would you say that making sure that you understand asking questions of the vendors and or those suppliers, and whether those vendors are audio video companies, making sure that they also fully understand your goals? Do you think that's also one of the big questions to make sure that the venue understands, or that vendor understands the goals that you're trying to accomplish, and ensuring that they're on the same page?
Definitely. I feel like every time we approach an event, we try to make it less of I'm hiring you, okay, let's just do this. I think we try to make it more of a partnership between all of us. And that can be done whether keeping open communication kind of within each other, and being open to if a vendor says they're going to be doing this, taking that and sending it right to the venue, or doing calls and things like that. So it's definitely to your benefit to involve both sides as much as possible, especially when you're say you have a venue already set and you're trying to involve a vendor. The more they can understand the space and what they're working with, the better you can ensure that there's less snafus on site, and better time leading up to the event.
Makes sense, and I think that's a good segue into challenge number 5, which is juggling the vendors. And how do you handle, how do you stay organized, for one? And another question for you: how do you stay organized, since that's such a critical component to event planning? And what questions have you learned to ask up front of the venue when it comes to outside vendors, and ensuring that everybody's on the same page?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to get lost trying to stay on top of, so many vendors, multiple vendors. Everyone has, a bit of a different method to stay organized. Everyone works a little differently, but it ultimately kind of comes down to the basic principle of tracking who your vendors are, what they'll be providing, the different steps your organization takes in terms of, payments, contracts, any sort of deadlines that even the vendor may have, whether it be delivery date of content, deposits, final quantities of things. And like I said earlier, we're big Excel people here and even have a production schedule document that we help us note and keep track of those milestone dates as well as the vendors involved with those milestones. And then in terms of, the relationship kind of between the venue and um, the venue and the vendor, an important step with the venue is knowing what it has and what you need to bring in with a vendor, and also which vendors are contracted with the venue itself. Many venues have exclusivity contracts, whether it be for catering or AV, rentals, things like that. So make sure you know ahead of time if there are any and those who those are, so that way you can kind of keep that when determining the venue, but also start talking with them early on. Another important step is knowing the limitations to the venue. Are there rigging points your vendor can use, ceiling height limitations, food and beverage limitations? The better you know what you can and can't do, the better the venue and the vendors and yourself can work as a team, like I said earlier, during the planning process. One thing I also like to do is even do multiple phase site visits between the venue, the vendors, and myself. So that way we can all together walk through the space, discuss what we're doing in each area. And a lot of times I find that vendors will ask questions that I may have not even thought of, which all kind of comes down to what we said earlier about technology and kind of catching those snafus. So, really kind of trying to educate yourself about what you're working with and what you're dealing with in terms of, involving both sides of the puzzle.
Makes sense, and I think that's one of those that I think we'll call it from a unique venue standpoint, or something that's not a traditional site. Sometimes that venue may not even know the answers to those questions because they're new at this as well too. So I think sometimes it's important to ensure that you find a vendor or a venue that can be sort of that one-stop shop for everybody in terms of providing everything, or potentially providing nothing but the space, and then you're able to sort of customize it using your list of preferred vendors, things like that. So I think that's always important. I am actually going to jump into a question because I think this is one that is really relevant to both the technology question that we were asking, or that we challenged that we were talking about before, but as well as how juggling the vendors. And this is a question, and Benny, maybe I'll pose it to you, and then I can maybe weigh in as well too. But the question was this: technology pricing as far as internet costs in meeting space is costly and seems to be a big part of an event. Have you ever negotiated discounts in this area? And it says we typically get anywhere from 10 to 20% discounts on audio visual, but not internet costs for attendees. I'll kind of jump into that real quickly. I know that's a challenge to us in the movie theaters is typically the bandwidth that we have coming into our movie theaters isn't substantial enough to handle attendees who need to be interactive and jump on everything from polling to audience responses to maybe even just to online testing. have you? And so for us, it is a challenge in an area that then we end up having to bring in. We'll call it temporary internet access from an outside vendor, and I know personally those costs can be expensive. How have you dealt with internet as it relates to venues and locations?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, one of the things I was going to bring up that you kind of touched on was there are multiple, different outside sources you can kind of bring into a space to help with internet. Like what you said, there are more costly routes. Um, Sometimes, one thing we do that as you get to larger scale, it may not work as well. But on a smaller scale, one thing you can do is maybe invest in the technology to do it, like a hotspot or some sort of router or things like that that you can bring into a space. We love our hotspots here, so because we like I said earlier, we do check-in systems which involve iPads and app and need to be connected. So there are multiple ways to bring in outside sources, more than I can even bring, remember off the top of my head, because I have someone here who's super tech savvy. So that's a great question, and one to definitely that you should pose the question to the venue. They may have ideas to strengthen signal. As far as the negotiation process, that you have to. It's kind of picking your battles in the negotiation process. Personally, we've been able to do kind of a push and pull, say, okay, well, if we can't have a discount on internet, can we have a larger discount on this? Really, you kind of want to build that relationship with the venue and, be able to approach it in a way that you're not going to off-put them by just flat out saying, hey, this is, but I mean, a lot of times you can even just be upfront with them. A lot of venues, a lot of vendors will accommodate within your budget. So don't be afraid to say, hey, look, my budget is this. Is there anything we can do to make it work within it? And more often than not, I've found that vendors and venues are willing to at least work somewhere, like I said, kind of adjust here and there. But kind of going back to what you said, Barry, there are multiple options to bring in internet, and there are new ones kind of coming out all the time. So it doesn't hurt personally for us. It didn't hurt to invest in our own kind of hotspot system or something like that.
That makes sense. Yeah, for sure. All right, I'm going to jump into the challenge number 6, which I think, again, is one of those that at the end of the day, we've got to make sure that we please the client. And I think a lot of times those clients may be internal employees or internal clients in employees and families, or they may be external clients as well. And so pleasing them is by far the most important thing. And I think as a planner, a lot of times that's where the satisfaction comes for us as it relates to did the event go well and were people pleased. And so with that, I think Benny, I'll phrase this one for you. I think we know pleasing the client is interesting challenge, and sometimes you're planning for your company's employees, and other times you're planning for someone else's potential clients. How do you gauge the success of an event, and what are some of the tips that you would give other event planners?
Yeah, so on our end, there's actually several ways we look at an event to figure out how successful we were. First off, kind of what I said earlier, we tried to determine or try to get numbers wherever we can. First off, we start with how many people RSVP'd that were invited, which could tell us how appealing the event was, or maybe how clear the communication was. How many people RSVP'd and checked in. which helps us determine kind of an overall attrition rate that we can then use as kind of a guideline for future events like it. It's especially helpful when you're calculating your food and beverage and rental quantities. And then in our case, we even tried to get patterns of how many of our employees RSVP with a guest as well, and try to get that attrition rate for attendance as well. So all of these help us form overall quantities, and can provide kind of a guideline when budgeting for future events. Kind of what I mentioned in the last question is we use a check-in tool. Check-in tools can be, or doing a check-in, while sometimes can, kind of be a hiccup or maybe a roadblock can be really beneficial, especially when you're dealing with recurring events, getting those quantities. There's so many apps now on iPads, and phones, things like that you can use for check-in tools. So that's a great way to help you get attendance counts as well, and help you better prepare on that quantity standpoint. Also, we like to conduct post-event employee opinion surveys where we ask both those who did and didn't attend questions like how informed they felt in each aspect with the communications that went out. And if they didn't attend, was it something specifically with the event that caused them not to? If they did attend, which activities or functions they participated in, which ones did they enjoy, if they had any feedback, and getting that direct input from the attendees helps us have a clear understanding of what areas worked and which ones we can improve on for future events. And then kind of using both of those methods combined, we can then kind of take calculated risks for future events. We can see if certain activities or venues or even types of events became kind of stale, and then can kind of present that data to our clients, which in our case is our executive team, and show them, how attrition has increased over the years or over the events, or how people rated an activity really low. And we can use this data to say, okay, people really like this, or had a lot of feedback that we should add this or do this instead, and then can provide an experience next time that is a fresh take, but also more in line with what they're wanting. So that's kind of why I like kind of my kind of keyword of calculated risk, because you're taking a risk trying new things, but you're doing that using kind of data you've gotten from previous events, and kind of learning and growing from that experience.
That's great. And I think when we were talking about this a couple weeks ago, one of the things that you had mentioned was, I think sometimes as a planner, when you're presenting options to internal or external clients, a lot of times they may have doubt because of preconceived notions or thoughts around a specific venue. And once I think this kind of goes back to the taking the calculated risks. I think when things, the aspects of the event or the whole thing isn't enjoyable, or it's just not working, or people are looking for that fresh experience, a lot of times it's that risk that you do have to take. And you had said this, which I thought was great. You said the wow factor overcomes the doubt and risk as long as they're calculated. And I think as event planners, every day we're trying to figure out how do we calculate the risk of what it is that we're trying to take, and making sure that those risks will ultimately end up in a reward, and making sure that the client is happy, and that we get the opportunity for future events. And so we know that the event business is highly stressful, and I'm going to say that event planners are like miracle workers. And every year I look forward to the Forbes top 10 most stressful jobs, and they've been posting the top 10 most stressful jobs for years. And every year, event planners and people who are event planning sales typically are within the top 5. And this year, the 2016 Forbes top 10 most stressful jobs listed event planners or event sales as number 5. And those that only come in as the 5th most stressful job out there And of those out there, it was only surpassed by number 1, which was active military, number 2, which was firefighters, 3, which were commercial airline pilots, 4, which was police officers, and then event planners and event sales planners were number 5. And I think that shows us a lot of the time why those risks always have to be calculated in what it is that we do. And so, what advice do you have for event planners to help keep their sanity and maintain their sanity and keep us doing what we love to do day in and day out?
Yeah, I love that survey. That's great. And I actually use that term miracle workers all the time. I actually just used it yesterday. In event planning, it's so easy to get kind of stuck in this bubble where you're just constantly trying to tackle everything that comes in at once, and it's so easy to get burnt out and overstressed. And we ourselves actually are facing it right now with BlizzCon just a week away, which is our gaming convention at Anaheim Convention Center. But I think it's important for us to not approach things frantically. Usually that leaves room for more error. And if you find yourself getting too worked up or burned out, just take that minute to pause, take a breath, even go for a walk, eat. It's very easy not to eat when you're an event planner, but we are humans, and you'll see it does you a lot of good. And then just come back and start to break things down. I actually took this amazing time management class, and the instructor told us, don't approach each day with the question of how much can I squeeze into this day. Instead, first, ask yourself, what are the things I need to get done today, and work your schedule around those. And I love that approach because, it helps me start to prioritize the long list of to-dos, and, turns that list kind of into kind of subcategories of your to-dos and the need to-dos right now. So, it's also easy for us to approach things so reactively as they come up, but it's important for you to kind of take a moment, stop, approach things really strategically, think about all the pros and cons of a plan, and then, put that into place. And as event planners, people kind of look to us to ensure that, plans with an event and even solutions are, the best scenario based off of our experiences with planning events. So it's important not to get frazzled if something comes up. But lastly, know that everyone is not going to be happy. Everyone has different tastes. The important thing is that you try to make the majority happy, and that you have something there for as many people as possible. The best thing you can do about negative comments is just accept them, thank the attendee, and then look into what you can do for next time. And it all kind of goes back to that calculated risk. So just take a breath, don't get too frazzled, and I even have to tell myself that very often.
That's right. I think part of that too is just making sure that you see people who are enjoying and having fun at the event, and that again keeps us going at the end of the day. I do want to make sure that we leave time and have some time here for questions and answers, but I do want to just give you guys a quick just a little information about us here at Regal. And one of the things that we had asked in the survey was if people had heard of or planned or been to an event in a theater. And we think that sometimes events at the movies are a little bit like Bigfoot. They're often heard but rarely seen. And just to give you a little bit of perspective, we here at Regal, we host over roughly 13,000 screenings and events in our movie theaters each and every year. And that equates to anywhere between, call it 3.5 to 4 million people coming to our movie theaters on an annual basis for an event, which is pretty amazing. And so just to give you a little bit about us, that we have over 560 movie theaters across the U.S. We are the largest movie theater chain exhibitor in the country. We are in 46 of the top 50 states, or I'm sorry, 42 states, including the District of Columbia, as well as 46 of the top 50 markets. And from our standpoint, we are a full service event planning division here at Regal, and we have a group of event consultants that come alongside anybody who's looking at hosting an event in one of our theaters, and we help from conception, event conception, to budgeting, to production, as well as products and services that lend themselves well. And so we try to pride ourselves on that one-stop shop and one contact for all of our locations, whether it's one event that you book with us or several that you book across the country. So anyhow, just wanted to give you guys on the phone a little bit about who we are. And we've been planning and hosting events in our movie theaters for over 15 years. And our consultants that, our event consultants here at Regal have years and years of event planning and event coordination experience. And so we try to be that one-stop shop for everybody. And I'm going to jump back. Well, I'll keep this resources page up as we kind of go through some of the questions that have come up. These are some helpful tips and places that people can go in order to find some more information out that might be useful to them in planning and hosting an event. But with that, what I want to do is jump to some of the questions, and let's take this first one here is, what tips do you have to increase survey responses? And the question is, we find a lot of people don't respond, especially external clients. And Benny, maybe you want to jump into that, and then I can add a little bit of information on our end at the end as well too.
Yeah, that's a great question. We actually ran into that ourselves when we first started doing surveys, and what we found the most effective was to do some sort of incentive. What we actually do is a $25 Amex gift card. You know, and even that little amount is enough to entice people to you know, go and do it. Just even the opportunity, and again, it's a raffle, it's not a for sure thing. So even that little incentive that you could win this gift card, you know, has been enough for people to participate. But also, it's important that your surveys are user friendly, they're concise and to the point, you know, and a lot of times, you know, mistakes I see with surveys is they just drag on for pages and pages, and you know, they're these really complex questions. And you know, the important thing is to have fun with it, because in the end, you know, event planning, you know, is about having fun and the enjoyment, and you know, you kind of continue that into your survey. So add a little incentive, make it, you know, nice and simple for people, and you know, we found that that's been really helpful with both people who did and didn't attend our events.
Yeah, and you know, I'll add to that a little as well too. We survey everybody who does an event with us here, and we try and test all sorts of different things. And we've done everything from no offer to, you know, offers around gift cards, things like that, as well as value-added content, maybe an ebook or something like that. And there's a huge high perceived value of a movie ticket. And so one thing, obviously, being in the movie business, we've used that as a carrot for survey responses, and it's something that we really get a lot more response to that than we do anything as it relates to a value add around an ebook or anything. And I think it lends itself to ensuring that we're keeping the survey concise and easy for those people to go through, so it doesn't take them a long time to complete, but yet that we're also using that information as we go forward to make sure that we're doing things better. And I think with the surveys, if it's internal, employees are always looking for, how was my feedback received, and are they making a change based upon the feedback that I'm giving them, and are things improving compared to what I wanted or what I thought how the event went. So I think those are a couple things. The other thing is making sure that it doesn't stay stagnant, which sometimes if you're surveying the same people and asking the same questions over and over, are you changing them up as time goes on? And I know we're sort of running low on time here. We have about 6 minutes long, 6 minutes left in our webinar, and I want to make sure that we respect everybody's time. So we'll answer a few more questions here. And if for some reason we don't get to your question here, we'll address it and send you an email as well to answer your question. The other question was, as a planner, how do you find new ways to engage new technology into your events? I'm going to have you answer that question, Benny, because the same question comes in as a vendor, and I'll answer that one. So how do you find new ways to engage new technology?
Yeah, that's a great question. Great question. Actually, one really good way is actually some of these resources that are listed right here. There are tons of magazines like BizBash and different resources that are constantly approaching or kind of unveiling new technologies out there. Really try to expose yourself as much as possible to other conventions, and get a feel for what you do. One thing we like doing as a team as a whole is to go to E3, which is this large gaming convention in LA, and we go to each booth space and see ideas that they've done, and really that goes even past technology. It goes to just how they laid things out as a space in general, and we've actually met with our AV companies that we've now used for years and years, that we're good friends with, and they actually have done displays at those conventions, and they'll walk us through and talk us about new things that they've brought in. So really strengthening that relationship with your AV vendor and exposing yourself to new events that you can get those ideas and see what other people have done. That's been so key for us as far as staying up to date on technology.
Yeah, that's great. And I think from a vendor's perspective, as that was a question, kind of the same question was, how do we as a vendor offer new technology solutions and things like that? And from us, we take kind of two different approaches. One is, and this relates specifically to technology, there's being on the bleeding edge of technology, and there's also being on the cutting edge of technology. And a lot of times in technology, being on the bleeding side of technology, being the first one out there and the early adopters of something in its infancy stage, can be extremely risky. So what we try to do is we try to evaluate what is that technology that's out there, and are we on the bleeding edge of technology where if we offer this product and service to our customers, are we really putting ourselves at risk because we're putting the client at risk based upon the newness of the technology, versus we'll take a little bit better approach and say, hey, we want to be on the cutting edge of technology, because at that point in time, a lot of, we'll call it beta testing, and things have been done with that new technology, and the kinks and the quirks ironed out, and we feel more confident that that's a product that we can sell and service and make sure that it gets delivered with the expectation of the client without the risk of failure. And again, that just goes back to technology in and of itself being at times can be so unstable, and we want to make sure that whatever we do from a stability standpoint is there. We'll also do some testing and beta testing with some of our preferred clients before we roll something out, to ensure that it is a product that meets the needs of our clients, as well as meets the budgetary constraints that we know all of us are faced by from a meeting planner perspective. We'll take a couple more questions, and we may run a couple minutes over, but I think it's good. This one was for you, Benny, specifically. You had mentioned in challenge number 6, check-in tools and apps for events. What does Blizzard use? Do you have some specific ones that you use?
We do. We've actually tried all sorts of ones, just because when checking in thousands of people, you need to make sure you're using one that can be reliable, that has a really user-friendly system that you can have temp staff kind of hop on and use really quick. There's two main ones that we kind of, there's one that we used to use a lot. It's called Event Farm. Um, and then there's a second one called that we now use and have been using for a couple of years now, called Social Tables. And the great thing about that one is it also has a floor plan tool, so you can kind of link up if you're doing like buffet or table seating. You can kind of link that with your floor plan and your check-in, so you can kind of assign it out. So Social Tables is the main one we use nowadays, and we've been loving it. But there's so many out there, but I've personally, from a event standpoint, from a user-friendly standpoint, and they themselves are a great team, use Social Tables.
That's great. And I think, we are at our allotted hour and out of time, and I want to make sure that we're respectful to everybody. And so with that, I want to say thanks to everybody at Unique Venues for allowing us to be on this webinar. And thanks for all that joined us. I hope that you found this information useful and helpful, and are taking away some key learnings that will help you in your everyday event planning. And like we said, go out there, and as event planners, let's be miracle workers and work miracles. I'm turning it back over to you, Shannon.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
I just want to thank you, Benny and Barry, so much for the information. It's been wonderful. And I want to thank everybody else, everyone who was in attendance, for your time today. If you have any questions about Regal, you can see there's a phone number and an email address and website right there. Of course, you can see there is a promotion. If you book an event at Regal Theater, by the end of the year, you receive a $100 Regal e-gift card. So I would encourage you to get in touch with them. And I just want to, again, one more time, say thank you. And I hope you all have a wonderful day.